When it comes to type 1 diabetes, it's easy to get like totally fixated on insulin, right?
That's
It's like
just
star of
something.
the show. But recently I've been seeing all this buzz about GLP-1 RAs, those meds like Wegovy and Mounjaro. And
Right.
initially I kind of brushed it off as, oh, just another weight loss thing.
Yeah.
But then I stumbled upon this article on diabetic tech.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the title alone, GLP-1 RAs and type 1 diabetes, more than meets the eye. I was like, I gotta read this. It really seemed like there's a whole other side to these medications, especially for, us, the T1D folks.
You're definitely onto something. While, yeah, weight loss is a known effect of GLP-1 RAs, their mechanisms are like way more intricate, especially when you're talking about type 1 diabetes. We're talking about a whole symphony of hormones and enzymes that are like the VIPs of managing this condition.
The article kept mentioning this double bubble problem in type 1 diabetes, and I gotta be honest, I was like, double bubble, what's that? So for me and for our listeners who might be just as clueless, can you break it down? What is this whole double bubble thing?
Okay, so picture this. Two bubbles.
Okay.
The first bubble, that's like the missing persons list of type 1 diabetes. You're missing crucial hormones.
Right.
We're talking insulin, obviously the key to getting glucose into your cells.
Right.
But also amylin, which is like the traffic controller for your digestion. It helps slow down how fast food moves through your system, giving your body more time to like process that glucose.
Okay, so one bubble is all about what's MIA when you've got T1D, the deficits. Makes sense. But what about bubble number 2? What's going on in that one?
Bubble number 2 is almost the flip side. It's like an overzealous party in your system where you've got too much of certain things that can really mess with your blood sugar.
Yeah.
We're talking about an excess of the enzyme, DPP4.
DPP4.
Yeah, DPP4.
Mm.
And, importantly, the hormone glucagon.
Okay, gotta admit, DPP4 is a new one for me. But glucagon, that's what they give you if your blood sugar goes, like, really low, right?
Exactly.
So why is having too much of it a bad thing?
You're right. Glucagon is like the emergency responder for low blood sugar. Brings your levels back up. But here's the catch. In type 1 diabetes, when you've got too much of it hanging around all the time, it's like trying to drive with the parking brake on.
Haha, I like that analogy.
It makes managing your blood sugar a constant uphill battle.
So it's like your body is working against itself, even when you're, doing all the right things with insulin.
Exactly. And that surplus glucagon often means people with T1D end up needing higher doses of insulin just to counteract it. And what does that lead to? More blood sugar swings throughout the day.
Ugh, that's the worst. Okay, so this is already giving me like a whole new appreciation for how complex type 1 diabetes really is. Now, I remember the article mentioned a researcher named Roger Unger and his work on glucagon. Can you fill us in on who he is and why his research is important?
Roger Unger, man, what a legend.
Yeah.
He was like, we need to talk about glucagon,
Uh-huh.
like really loudly. He was convinced that getting a handle on glucagon in type 1 diabetes was just as important as nailing down insulin therapy. He
Intriguing.
did these groundbreaking studies, actually suppressed glucagon production in mice with type 1 diabetes. And guess what? The mice needed way less insulin to keep their blood sugar in check.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's not just about adding more insulin, it's about like fine-tuning the whole system, which actually reminds me of something else I came across in the article. This Israeli company, Levicure. They're developing a potential treatment for type 1 diabetes, right?
Yeah, Levicure's doing some seriously cool stuff.
And they're tackling both the immune system's attack on beta cells and this whole glucagon issue, aren't they?
Two birds, one stone. They're trying to stop the immune system from going rogue on those insulin-producing beta cells.
Right.
And they're finding ways to, like, outsmart the overproduction of glucagon.
And if memory serves me right, they're actually using a GLP-1 component in their therapy, right?
They are.
Which kind of brings us full circle. So these GLP-1 RAs, they're not just about shedding a few pounds.
Yep.
They might be a key to something way bigger.
That's what's so captivating about this whole avenue of research. It's like we're pulling back the curtain on type 1 diabetes and realizing, whoa, these different pieces are all intricately connected. And GLP-1 RAs, they're right there in the thick of it. They really could be way more powerful than we initially thought.
I'm already like mind blown and we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves, can you give us the rundown on what makes GLP-1 RAs potentially so groundbreaking for people with type 1 diabetes? How do they actually work their magic?
All right, so there are three main ways GLP-1 RAs can change the game for T1D. They all tie back to what we've been talking about.
Lead on me.
Okay, so first up, GLP-1 RAs can actually put the brakes on glucagon production.
Oh, interesting.
Remember how we talked about that excess glucagon being like a constant wrench in the works.
Mm.
Well, GLP-1 RAs get in there, and it's a bit technical, but basically they increase certain molecules inside the cells that make glucagon. And this tells those cells, hey, pump the brakes. Less glucagon, please. It's like they're giving your body's natural blood sugar regulation a much-needed chill pill.
Makes sense. So less glucagon, fewer blood sugar spikes. What's number 2 on the list of GLP-1RA superpowers?
Number 2 is all about slowing things down.
Slowing things down.
Yeah, they slow down gastric transit, remember?
Yeah.
That whole thing amylin's supposed to do but often can't in type 1 diabetes. GLP-1 RAs step in and mimic that, basically telling your stomach, hold your horses, let's release that food into the intestines a bit slower.
Ah, so it's like they're giving your body a chance to catch up, process that glucose more gradually after a meal. Wow, that's 2 amazing things. What's the third trick up their sleeve?
All right, for their final act, GLP-1 RAs tackle ghrelin. Remember ghrelin?
The hunger hormone. As if dealing with blood sugar wasn't hard enough, right?
Exactly. And in type 1 diabetes, ghrelin can be a real troublemaker, often leading to like those intense cravings and overeating.
Oh, tell me about it.
But here's the good news. GLP-1 RAs can actually block ghrelin's effects.
They can.
Yeah, they step in and say, nope, not today, ghrelin. It's like they help your brain and your stomach get on the same page about hunger, which can be a game changer for those cravings and those blood sugar spikes that can happen after a big meal.
This is honestly way more intricate and fascinating than I could have imagined. It's like we're peeling back the layers of type 1 diabetes and discovering this whole new level of understanding.
And we're just scratching the surface. But what's
Yeah.
really cool is that these mechanisms,
Mhm.
as complex as they are, actually translate into real, tangible benefits for people dealing with type 1 diabetes day in and day out.
Okay, now you really got my attention. Let's dive into those potential benefits. What kind of impact could these medications actually have on how people manage their type 1 diabetes?
So when we talk about those benefits, one of the biggies is how GLP-1 RAs could really shake up this whole time and range, or TIR thing.
TIR. Okay, for those of us who aren't walking diabetes dictionaries, what exactly does time and range mean?
Think of TIR as like your blood sugar report card.
Okay.
It's the percentage of time your blood sugar's hanging out in that sweet spot, that healthy target range.
And what's that range, just as a refresher?
For most people with type 1 diabetes, it's somewhere between 70 and 180 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay.
The more time you spend in that range, the lower your risk of all those long-term diabetes complications. You know, the heart disease, the nerve damage, the eye problems, all that stuff.
Right, of course. So more time in range equals a healthier, happier you. But how exactly do GLP-1 RAs help make that happen? How do they boost that TIR scorecard?
Remember those 3 mechanisms we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the glucagon busting, digestion slowing, hunger taming trifecta.
Bingo. It's like they're giving your blood sugar a team of bodyguards, tackling those out-of-range excursions from every angle.
So less glucagon means fewer of those crazy blood sugar spikes.
Exactly.
Slower digestion, more time for your body to process that glucose, so gentler rises in blood sugar after meals.
Right.
And then taming those cravings, that's got to help with those like impulsive snack attacks that can send your blood sugar into orbit.
It's all connected. It's about restoring balance. And the article also mentioned GLP-1 RAs and closed-loop insulin delivery systems. Those are like the self-driving cars of diabetes tech, right?
Yeah, closed-loop systems or artificial pancreas systems, I've heard about them. So they basically automate insulin delivery.
In a nutshell, yeah, they're constantly monitoring your blood sugar and making adjustments to your insulin doses automatically so you don't have to.
That's incredible. So no more constantly checking your blood sugar and fiddling with your insulin pumps.
Ideally, yeah.
Here.
It's like having a co-pilot for your diabetes management, always working in the background to keep things running smoothly.
That sounds amazing, but I'm guessing it's not quite perfect yet.
It's getting there. It's a rapidly evolving field, and the technology is getting better all the time. But that's where GLP-1 RAs come in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do they fit into the closed loop puzzle?
Because they're already helping keep your blood sugar more stable in those 3 key ways we discussed. GLP-1 RAs could make those closed-loop systems even more effective.
Interesting. So it's like they're taking some of the burden off the closed loop system.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You're using a closed-loop system,
Right.
but you've also got a GLP-1 RA on board working its magic in the background. Your blood sugar is already more balanced, so the closed-loop system doesn't have to work as hard, it doesn't have to make as many adjustments, and your blood sugar is more likely to stay right where it should be.
So it's like GLP-1 RAs are helping these systems live up to their full potential, leading to even tighter blood sugar control and hopefully fewer of those dreaded highs and lows that can really throw you for a loop.
Exactly. And there's actually anecdotal evidence from people already using these open source automated insulin delivery systems alongside GLP-1 arrays with impressive results.
That's exciting. It really sounds like we could be on the cusp of a major breakthrough in how we approach type 1 diabetes. But of course, you've also been careful to point out that this is still very much an evolving area of research. What are some of the big questions that researchers are still wrestling with?
Yeah, it's important to be realistic. As promising as the early findings are, we need more research to really know the long-term safety and effectiveness of using GLP-1 arrays in type 1 diabetes.
What do you mean by long-term effects?
That's one of the big unknowns, right? We need more data to see how these medications perform over time, what the potential side effects might be with long-term use, and if there are any unexpected impacts on other aspects of health. It's about making sure we have the full picture.
Right. What else are scientists still trying to figure out?
Dosage is a big one. We need to nail down those optimal dosages of GLP-1 RAs for people with type 1 diabetes because they might be different from the doses used for weight loss. And figuring out how to best integrate these medications with current therapies, like insulin pumps and CGMs, that's key.
It's like we're charting a course through uncharted territory. It's exciting to think about the possibilities, but we also need to proceed with caution.
That's a perfect way to put it. And just like with any exploration, there are bound to be challenges along the way. But the potential rewards, in terms of improving the lives of millions of people living with type 1 diabetes, they're
I
huge.
couldn't agree more. So we've explored this double bubble challenge of type 1 diabetes, the often overlooked role of glucagon, the incredible mechanisms of GLP-1 RAs, and how they might completely change the game for managing this condition. What a deep dive this has been.
It has been fascinating to delve into these topics with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. Remember, the more we know about type 1 diabetes, the more empowered we are to take charge of our health. Until next time, stay curious. So it kind of begs the question, right? Could GLP-1 RAs be the key to like not just managing type 1 diabetes, but actually, just living with it, not letting it rule your life?
I think that's the dream for a lot of people touched by type 1 diabetes, to move beyond just managing and into, like you said, truly living.
What I find so fascinating is how this research is really shaking up those old school ideas about type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
We've been so focused on insulin for so long, it's almost like we forgot there's a whole other cast of characters in this whole blood sugar production,
It's a
right?
total paradigm shift. For decades, replacing that missing insulin, that was the name of the game, and for good reason, right? But now we're realizing, hey, there's this whole other side of the equation.
Right.
It's not enough to just add insulin. You got to address those hormones and enzymes that could really throw things out of whack.
Right. Like we've been trying to solve this incredibly complex puzzle, but only looking at a handful of pieces.
Yeah.
And now, with what we're learning about glucagon and the potential of these GLP-1 RAs, it feels like we're finally starting to see the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this such an exciting frontier for type 1 diabetes research. We're moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach and towards like truly personalized strategies.
Which brings me to something you mentioned earlier about this still being a developing area of research. For our listeners who are living with type 1 diabetes and are probably feeling, I don't know, a mix of hope and maybe a little bit of, okay, but prove it, what would you say to them?
I'd say it's more than fair to feel both. Hope is a good thing, but a healthy dose of caution is never a bad idea either. Scientific progress, it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And what works for one person might not be the right fit for another. GLP-1 RAs, they're not a magic bullet, and we still got a lot to learn.
So for our listeners who are intrigued, who are thinking, okay, maybe this is something I should look into, what's the most important piece of advice you can give them?
Talk to your doctor. That's always the first step.
Right.
Have an open, honest conversation with your healthcare provider about your specific situation, your diabetes management goals, and really weigh the potential risks and benefits of adding a GLP-1 array into your treatment plan. They can help you navigate all of that.
Solid advice. And on that note of informed exploration, I think it's time for us to wrap up this absolutely incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from those intricate workings of hormones and enzymes to the potential of GLP-1 arrays to really revolutionize type 1 diabetes management.
It's been fantastic exploring all of this with you.
The pleasure has been all mine. And to our amazing listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. Remember, knowledge is power, The more we understand about type 1 diabetes, the better equipped we are to advocate for our health and truly live our best lives. Until next time, stay curious.